So it's fun to watch Joe Biden, who's now been completely hijacked by the radical left, to the extent that he is now giving the go-ahead to the most radical members of the radical left. Now, remember, we've been told that Joe Biden is a moderate, and the Democratic Party is a party of moderates. We were told that the only people who are into norm breaking are the people on the right. Right? Donald Trump was a guy who's going to violate norms. He was all about norm violation, shattering the norms. And there are some people who celebrated that. Okay, Joe Biden shattered norms. Barack Obama shattered norms. The dirty little secret of American politics is that when you grant all power to the executive branch, pretty quickly norms begin to be shattered. And when the American people are willing to run roughshod over norms to get to utopia, those norms end up being trampled. You know, Joe Biden was Captain Norms when he was in the Senate, right? He was the guy who was working across the aisle, and he was the one who was upholding the filibuster and all this. Now he's talking about shattering the filibuster. Now he is talking about how the Democrats need to ram through every deal without any bipartisan support. Okay, this reared its ugliest head yesterday when protesters followed Krysten Sinema, who's the senator from Arizona, who, again, is sort of the Democratic John McCain in all of this. Protesters followed Krysten Sinema into the bathroom. Here's a little bit of video of what that looked like.
We need a Build Back Better plan right now.
We knocked on doors. We need solutions. The Build Back Better plan has the solutions that we need.
We knocked on doors for you to get you elected, and just how we got you elected, we can get you out of office if you don't support what you promised us.
We need 7 million citizenship for 7 million. We need the Build Back Better plan right now.
I'm just going to point out here that it is my personal belief that everyone ought to be able to poop in peace. This is my personal belief. I want to live in an America where we can all take a dump in privacy and peace. If that's too much for you, well, you can find plenty of left-wing programs that will tell you differently. I was told that women's spaces were sacred spaces. Apparently not, if you're going to vote in favor of a bipartisan infrastructure act, but not in favor of a $3.5 trillion spending act. Now, the part of this that's amazing is how much kind of soft support the protesters receive for following Krysten Sinema into a bathroom. Imagine if it had been Republicans following Krysten Sinema into a bathroom. There had been talk of rape culture. There had been talk of the fears that women have to experience when they go into a public restroom, of assault, that these are private spaces. But when it's leftists following Krysten Sinema into a bathroom, very different story. So the protesters follow Krysten Sinema into the bathroom, and Joe Biden is asked about this yesterday. Now, you would imagine that Joe Biden, remember, he ran for office on the basis of he was a moral person who was going to restore the soul of the nation. No more norms violations, back to norms, back to conciliatory language, back to unity. Well, Joe Biden was asked about people following Krysten Sinema into the bathroom, and here were his rather tepid remarks.
Senator Sinema last night was chased into a restroom. Do you think that those tactics are crossing a line?
I don't think they're appropriate tactics, but it happens to everybody. From the only people it doesn't happen to are people who have Secret Service standing around them. So it's part of the process.
It's part of the process. It's part of the process. It's inappropriate, but it happens to everybody, and it's part of the process. Does it, though? Does it really happen to everybody? And is the response from the President of the United States the same way? It's amazing what sort of norm violation is considered totally okay or unworthy of further comment by the Democratic establishment, and what sort of norm violation is deeply worthy of comment by the establishment. If Tucker Carlson does a segment about military uniforms for pregnant pilots, that is worthy of the worst sort of ire from the federal government. But if a sitting United States senator is followed into the bathroom by protesters, then that is worthy of a shrug, a little bit of a, it happens, whatever. Again, it is incredible, the sort of treatment to which the Democrats believe that people ought to be subjected so long as they are on the wrong side of a political issue. Remember, she's a Democratic senator. This is not even a Republican. But this goes all the way back to the Trump administration. Right? This goes back to the notion that if you have the wrong sorts of views, then you ought to be browbeaten. If you have the wrong sorts of views, then you ought to be run out of restaurants like Sarah Huckabee Sanders. If you have the wrong sort of views, you ought to be intimidated in life. Like this, Krysten Sinema will be fine. She's a sitting United States senator. But the problem is that this sort of attitude bleeds down to pretty much everything. If you have the wrong views in American life, you can be bullied out of your job. You can be ostracized from your social community. You can be treated like garbage. And a lot of people will just kind of shrug and go, oh, well, you deserved it. You had the wrong sorts of views. Yeah, that's really, really ugly stuff. And unfortunately, you saw a lot of blue checks on Twitter yesterday who are basically talking up that sort of position. And most famously, Jezebel, which is, of course, a radical left site. They put up a piece titled Absolutely Bully Krysten Sinema Outside of Her Bathroom Stall. The senator is holding all of us back, and some of her most vulnerable constituents are rightfully sick of it. This is by a columnist named Ashley Reese. Quote, the effectiveness of certain kinds of protest will always be up for debate. So naturally, a group of activists pursuing Senator Kyrsten Sinema around Arizona State University campus over the weekend, and controversially somehow, briefly following Sinema into a public restroom to note that their family members were deported, is bound to prompt some pearl clutching. On Sunday, social justice organization Living United for Change in Arizona uploaded a video of activists asking Sinema to defend her opposition to President Biden's Build Back Better Act. Democrats at large support the bill, but Manchin and Sinema do not. It's no wonder her constituents, who don't understand what the F she's doing any better than the rest of us, are piping mad enough to pester her after she finished teaching a class at ASU. Lucha's video shows a group of activists waiting outside Sinema's classroom. When she emerges, they ask if they could talk to her briefly about the importance of Build Back Better. She says, actually, I'm heading out. And then she went down to a bathroom. We knocked on doors for you to get elected, said an activist named Blanca, and just how we got you elected, we can get you out of office if you don't support what you promised us. Cue the sounds of toilets flushing. Apparently, the only thing not right was following Sinema into the bathroom. Just terrible. Just terrible. And how could people be upset that this would happen? Okay, so Jen Psaki yesterday, she tried to walk this back because even some of the members of the Biden administration are like, this is a little much. So here's Jen Psaki trying to walk this back a little bit.
What happened this weekend was that her classroom, her students, and the safe and intellectually stimulating environment she's worked to create during the years of teaching at ASU was breached. That's inappropriate and unacceptable. And I think the context of what happened here is important, despite the fact that, of course, the president stands for the fundamental right of people to protest, to object, to criticize, as they often do outside of the gates of the White House.
Okay, so the question for the Democratic Party is going to be whether they actually stand up to this sort of stuff. Because remember, we can pretend that this is sort of an isolated incident, but large parts of the Democratic Party last year were fine with people burning down entire cities. We spent an entire year pretending that riots weren't happening in America's major cities so that the media and Democrats could pretend that the protests over George Floyd's death had not, in fact, morphed into riots. Meanwhile, Kamala Harris, the current president of the United States, vice president, I make the same mistake Joe Biden makes, Vice President Kamala Harris is tweeting out bail funds for people who are burning things down in places like Minnesota. So when we talk about norm violation and rule breaking and where we go from here, we have to understand that if in many cases, the norm violation is happening inside the House, and it has now hijacked many of the people who used to be considered moderates, including Joe Biden. And that is very scary for the future of the country. It matters an awful lot more than how much money we spend in the next month or so. And that matters an awful lot. But I'll tell you what matters even more is the fact that we have now reached the point in American politics where huge swaths of the American people are just like, you can do whatever you want to do so long as it helps you achieve the purpose you want to achieve. That is a recipe for the country falling apart. The battle for the culture is heating up. We here at the Daily Wire are making some big moves. So be sure to like, subscribe, ring that bell, because you're not going to want to miss a single moment.